If you had to choose between honor and love, which would you choose? It's easy to answer when you're warm, safe, and surrounded by everything that makes sense. But out here, in the dust-choked silence of the American West, where the wind never forgets your name, that question burns through the soul like hot iron. Clara McAllister used to be someone's daughter, the rancher's girl, a sharp mind raised on the brittle edge of expectation. Her mother died when she was 12, and from then on, it was just her and her father, stern, silent, built of weather and duty. He ran cattle, ran men, and expected Clara to grow into the kind of woman who wore respectability like a corset. Tight, restrictive, presentable, but no one ever tells you what to do when love comes wrapped in danger. No one ever warns you how easy it is to mistake defiance for freedom, or passion for salvation. Clara was barely 20 when she met Thomas McAllister. He didn't come in with guns blazing. He didn't shout or swagger like the others. He just watched. And when he finally spoke, his voice was soft, honest, like he'd already seen every part of her, the loneliness, the hunger for more, and didn't flinch. They met in the middle of nowhere at a supply station outside Abilene. She was riding for her father's business. He was already running. Rumor was he'd robbed a payroll wagon down near Waco and left 2 deputies face down in the river. But none of that showed in his eyes. Not yet. Clara didn't tell her father. How could she? He would have strung Thomas up himself, no trial needed. So she kept quiet, wrote letters, stole time, and by the time she realized what she'd stepped into, it was too late. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was his. They married in secret, under a false name, in a dusty chapel watched only by God and the wind. And for a time, it almost felt like peace. He promised her they'd go clean, buy land in Oregon, raise a family away from the blood and dust. But dreams don't grow well in stolen soil. Thomas couldn't let go of the life. Or maybe the life wouldn't let go of him. Robbery after robbery. More names on wanted posters. More cold eyes staring too long. Clara stayed. Maybe out of love. Maybe because no one else would have her now. Maybe because she believed deep down that love could outlast sin. But sin doesn't knock, it kicks the door in. It was late September when the law finally caught up. A standoff at a freight yard west of Dodge. They called it justice. She called it murder. Thomas was gunned down in the dust, no chance to surrender, no last words. Clara was dragged away in chains, her hands still red from trying to hold his chest closed, like love could stop the bleeding. The papers called her the outlaw's widow. The preacher called her damned. The women of the town wouldn't look her in the eye. And when she stood in front of the judge, they didn't ask what she knew. They didn't ask what she'd survived. They just asked where the money was. She didn't know. Thomas had never told her. Or maybe he did, and she refused to remember. Instead of a noose, they sentenced her to transfer, to testify, to be used as bait, because someone out there, one of Thomas's old gang, had vanished with the stolen fortune, and someone thought Clara might still matter enough to draw them out. So they sent a man to escort her from Dodge to Cheyenne, a lawman. Not some green deputy with shaky hands and a badge too big for his chest. No, they sent Eli Remington, the same Eli who'd once ridden with Thomas. The same Eli who'd turned on the gang when blood got spilled over greed. The same Eli who'd nearly killed Thomas once, and now held Clara's fate in his hands. She hadn't seen him in 4 years. But when he stepped into that cell, the air thickened. No words, just a long look, full of history and hurt and something sharp beneath it all. She stood tall, even in chains. He didn't flinch. Outside, the horses were waiting. So was the ride north. So was the danger. But inside Clara, something else stirred. Not fear, not grief. Something colder, something stronger. She wasn't just the outlaw's widow anymore. She was about to become the lawman's burden. Or maybe something more. If the one man who could save you was also the man who once tried to destroy the person you loved, could you trust him? That was the weight Clara carried the morning they rode out of Dodge. A sky the color of old tin hung above them, and the prairie stretched so wide it made you feel like God had forgotten where he put the edges. She rode with her hands bound, not by rope anymore, but by reputation. People watched from behind shutters, their faces tight with judgment and stories they'd never heard, but were sure were true. The outlaw's widow, the harlot who married a thief, the woman who chose wrong. Eli didn't speak for the first hour. He rode ahead, boots steady in the stirrups, eyes always scanning the horizon like danger was stitched into the clouds. He didn't look back. Didn't need to. Clara could feel his presence, tight, guarded, like a man carrying something too heavy for too long. The trail to Cheyenne wasn't a short one. It cut through canyons where the shadows moved like ghosts, and across plains where the silence pressed against your skin. Each mile carried the weight of old memories and things left unsaid. They made camp that night beneath a grove of pinyon pines. The fire crackled low, throwing soft light onto Eli's face. He looked different, older, more weathered, but not broken. Clara sat on the other side of the fire, wrapped in the same coat she'd worn the night Thomas died. The blood was gone, but the grief hadn't left. It just lived deeper now, quieter, like a wound that no longer bled but never stopped aching. Eli finally broke the silence. "You could have run." Clara didn't look up. "Where would I go? They took everything." He nodded slowly. "Still, most don't sit through judgment and come out alive." She met his eyes then. "You sound disappointed." A flicker of something, shame, anger, passed through his expression, but it didn't stay. "I'm not here to judge you, Clara. No," she said softly. "You're here to deliver me, just like they ordered." The fire snapped. A gust of wind stirred the dust, and for a moment nothing but the sound of breathing and the shifting coals filled the space between them. Then Eli spoke again. "Thomas was my brother once." His voice cracked around the word brother, not by blood, but by bond, by choices, by years on the trail when men bled for each other without asking why. Clara looked at him differently now. "He said you betrayed him." "He betrayed us first." Eli's jaw clenched. "The last job. He didn't tell anyone the banker's wife would be there. She screamed. Got in the way. He didn't flinch, just pulled the trigger." Clara's breath caught. She had always believed Thomas had lines he wouldn't cross. Eli saw the doubt in her face and didn't press further. He just stood, tossed a log on the fire, and walked a few steps into the darkness, letting the silence fall again like nightfall over a battlefield. Clara stayed by the fire. Her thoughts were loud, louder than they'd been in weeks. She remembered the way Thomas had held her, the way he'd promised her peace, a new life, a clean start. She remembered his hands, how gentle they were with her, and how ruthless they were with others. And she remembered the day she first saw Eli, years ago, outside a saloon in Wichita. He and Thomas were laughing like brothers do. But even then, Clara had felt it, that strange gravity, that quiet pull from Eli. Not charm, not danger, just clarity. And now, here they were, two people connected by a man who was no longer here, two people carrying different kinds of guilt, two people too proud to say they were lonely. Clara curled up against her saddle and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come, because the truth was rising in her chest, uninvited and heavy. She wasn't sure anymore what side of the story she belonged to. Was she Thomas's widow or Eli's prisoner? Or maybe she was something neither man ever saw coming. A woman no longer running from her past, but choosing her own road, even if it cut straight through the heart. What if the road that led you away from the man you loved led you straight into the arms of someone you were never supposed to trust? By the second day, the land began to stretch wide again, dry, endless hills that made you feel small and forgotten. The kind of place where names didn't matter, and history disappeared like footprints in dust. It was the kind of place where a woman could bury her past, if she was lucky. But Clara wasn't feeling lucky. She was feeling watched, not just by Eli, who rode beside her now instead of ahead, silent and unreadable as ever, but by the land itself. Every twist of the trail seemed to whisper secrets. Every bird call, every gust of wind in the grass made her stomach knot, as if someone was following, watching, waiting. They stopped near noon to water the horses. Eli crouched at the stream, checking the tracks in the mud, his hand hovering just above the surface, like he could read the future in the ripples. 3 riders, he muttered, 2 days behind. Light horses, traveling fast. Clara felt it then, cold, sharp, familiar. That gut-deep fear that no law could protect you from. Eli didn't say it, but she knew what it meant. Someone was coming. Someone who didn't want her to make it to Cheyenne, and maybe not just for the money. Back in the saddle, silence returned. But it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that builds between two people who know too much and trust too little. Later that evening, as the sun bled out across the plains, they camped near an old trading post, abandoned, roof half collapsed, still standing against the wind like it had something left to say. Eli handed her a blanket. She didn't thank him. Instead, she asked, "Do you still think about him?" He didn't answer right away. He took a long breath, then stared into the fire. "I think about the man he used to be, the man who saved my life more than once, the man who could have been something else if he hadn't loved the wrong things too much." Clara wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You mean me?" His eyes didn't waver. "No, I mean the gold, the guns, the reputation. You were the one right thing he had." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. Not her father, not the law, certainly not the women in town who crossed the street when she passed. But Eli had seen the same bloodstains and still said she was worth something. She didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. "Then why did you chase him down?" she asked, the words catching. He looked away, jaw hard. "Because loving someone doesn't mean you let them burn down the world. Thomas crossed lines even we couldn't stomach. Someone had to stop him." Clara shook her head slowly. "You mean someone had to make an example?" "No," Eli said softly. "I mean, someone had to save what was left of him before there was nothing left to save." And there it was, the strange thing about the West. It wasn't just dust and gunfire and lawless men. It was the choices, the unbearable choices, between blood and duty, between justice and love, between standing tall and walking away. The fire popped, a coal tumbling to the edge of the pit. And in the flicker of that firelight, Clara saw something in Eli's eyes she hadn't noticed before. Loneliness. Not the kind you carry in silence. The kind that comes from watching too many people fall on the wrong side of the line. From having to be the one who pulled the trigger. From surviving when maybe you didn't want to. She moved closer, not out of affection, but out of something deeper. Understanding, recognition. The same scars in a different shape. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. Some silences are louder than words. That night, she dreamed of Thomas. But not the man she married. The man she buried. The cold face, the wide-open eyes that never closed. And beside him another face, Eli's. Not angry, not proud. Just waiting. When she woke at dawn, the horses were restless. A storm was rising out west, and Eli was already saddling up. They rode hard that day, faster than before, because now Clara wasn't just riding toward justice. She was riding toward a truth she wasn't sure she could survive. And with every mile she was starting to wonder, was it possible to grieve one man and begin to love another? If the heart starts to heal in the presence of someone who once hunted the man you loved, is it still betrayal? The storm broke on the fourth day. It came with no warning, just a sudden shift in the wind, like the prairie was holding its breath. The clouds rolled in, fast and dark, swallowing the sky whole. The kind of storm that makes horses jitter and old men pray. And in the middle of it, two riders, one with a badge, the other with a past, found shelter beneath the black bones of an old cattle barn, half rotted and leaning like it had secrets of its own. Clara sat in the far corner, arms wrapped around her knees as the rain hammered down like fury itself. Her clothes were soaked. Her hair clung to her face. But her thoughts burned hotter than the fire Eli had barely managed to light. She watched him work, the way his hands moved without panic, the way he shielded the flame from the wind with his own body, the way he glanced at her, not out of suspicion, but something gentler, maybe even concern. How had it come to this? She used to imagine love as something clean, pretty, tied with ribbons and promises. What they don't tell you is that love, real love, often shows up dirty, bloodied, torn between right and wrong, and sometimes it comes wrapped in the face of the man your husband once called his enemy. She couldn't stop thinking about what Eli had said the night before, that Thomas loved the wrong things too much. But what if she had been one of those wrong things? What if all she'd ever done was make men lose themselves? The fire crackled low, and Eli sat down across from her, his coat steaming from the heat, eyes locked on the dancing flame. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked, voice quiet. Clara blinked. "Starting over? With what name? What past?" He shrugged. "With your own." "I don't even know what that means anymore," she said. "I used to be Clara Bishop, then Clara McAllister. Now I'm just the outlaw's widow." "Maybe you're more than that," Eli said. "Maybe you've always been." She scoffed, but it wasn't cruel. It was sad. "Is that what you tell yourself? When the things you did start clawing at your conscience?" Eli didn't flinch. "I don't lie to myself. I know what I've done. I've put men in the ground. Some deserved it. Some just got in the way. But I never pulled the trigger without asking if I could live with the answer." Clara stared at him. "What about Thomas?" His jaw tightened. "That answer still keeps me up at night." The barn groaned under the weight of the rain. Outside, thunder cracked like gunfire in the hills. Inside, something shifted. Clara rose slowly, walked to the edge of the fire, and sat beside him, not touching, but close. Close enough to feel the heat of him. "You hated him," she whispered. "I loved him," he said. "That's what made it worse." Silence again, but not empty. This one was heavy with truth. Clara's voice trembled when she spoke next. "He wasn't kind to me in the end, not the way he used to be. He was angry all the time, paranoid, like he was already halfway gone and just waiting for someone to finish the job." Eli didn't speak. She looked at him, eyes shining, not with tears, but with the ache of remembering. "I wanted to believe I could save him," she said. "But you can't save someone who's already picked the fire over the water." The words fell quiet. Eli turned to her. His hand moved, slowly, cautiously, then stopped just short of hers. "Clara," he said, voice low. But before he could say what he meant to say, the horses outside screamed. Eli stood in a flash, gun drawn. Clara followed, heart pounding. Outside, hooves pounded the wet earth. 3 riders, shadows in the rain, bandanas up, rifles out. Whoever they weren't here for shelter. They were here for blood. Eli yanked her back behind the wall, breath tight, eyes scanning. Clara's pulse throbbed in her ears, and just like that, the quiet between them shattered. Honor, love, survival. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was a collision, and she was at the center of it, because someone out there didn't just want her captured. They wanted her silenced, forever. If you had to choose between dying for a man you once loved or surviving beside a man you were never supposed to feel anything for, what would you choose? The gunfire came fast, cutting through the storm like it had a purpose. Bullets tore into the wood above Clara's head. Splinters flew. The horses screamed again, one of them breaking loose and vanishing into the dark, wild rain. Eli fired back from the edge of the barn, cold and calm, like he'd done this 100 times, and maybe he had. Clara's heart pounded. She didn't cry, didn't scream. That part of her had died months ago, maybe even before Thomas had. She just gritted her teeth, pressed her back to the post, and reached down for the pistol Eli had tossed her before camp. Small, loaded, and heavier than it looked. Outside, the voices of the riders cut through the thunder. "Hand her over, lawman. She's worth more dead than testifying." There it was, plain as blood on snow. She wasn't just a widow. She was bait, and someone had decided she'd outlived her usefulness. Eli didn't answer, just kept firing, careful, controlled. He was good. Too good to be a man who ever fit cleanly inside a badge. Clara could see it now, the way his past clung to him like smoke, the way he fought not just to win, but to end something. A bullet tore through the side of the barn. Eli ducked, cursed under his breath. He was hit. Shoulder, nothing fatal, but enough to slow him. Clara crawled to him, blood soaking through his shirt. "I can draw them out," she said, the words too fast, too sharp. "No," he snapped. "You'll die here. Better me than you." Her hands shook, not from fear, but from anger, from something deeper. "I'm tired of people deciding what I'm worth," she hissed. "Thomas did it. The judge did it. I won't let you do it, too." He looked at her then, really looked, and in that second, everything unsaid between them was suddenly there, bare and burning. She kissed him, not sweet, not soft, desperate, like it might be the last thing she ever did. Then she stood, raised her pistol, and stepped into the open barn door with the rain slashing down like knives. The riders saw her and froze. They hadn't expected that. Clara raised the gun. "I'm not hiding," she shouted into the storm. "You want me? Then come and see how easy I am to take." A long silence. Then one rider spurred forward. That was his mistake. A single shot cracked through the night. Eli, bleeding and leaning from cover, dropped the man clean off his horse. Chaos followed. The remaining two split wide, one circling left, the other vanishing into the trees. Eli staggered to his feet, reloading with one hand. "Behind you!" Clara screamed. She turned, fired, missed, but Eli didn't. When it was over, the rain kept falling, quiet now, as if the world was mourning the cost of another night survived. Clara dropped to her knees in the mud, not from weakness, but because her body had finally stopped running. Eli limped over, blood down his arm, rain in his eyes, and something else there, too, something that felt like the edge of hope. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, but then her voice broke. "I was never supposed to fall in love again." He knelt beside her, took her hand. Neither was I. The barn stood behind them, broken, smoking, shelter and battleground all in one. And somewhere in the silence, the wind carried off the last trace of her old life. Clara McAllister, the outlaw's widow, was gone, and in her place stood a woman who had chosen, not safety, not guilt, but love, knowing it could still cost her everything. If love demands that you betray the past, can it still be called love? By the time the sun returned, the land looked different. Not greener, not kinder, just quieter, like the storm had stripped something from it, and from them. The bodies of the riders were buried near the trading post, nameless, faceless in the end. No last rites, no markers, just the rain-washed earth reclaiming them. Eli's wound festered through the night. Clara tended it with careful hands, the way a woman learns to do when life doesn't offer her the option of looking away. She boiled water, tore strips from her own dress, pressed cloth to his fevered skin as he bit down on his own belt, and through it all she didn't speak of love, not once, because the truth was too raw, too dangerous, and because sometimes, when your heart is full, silence becomes the only language that doesn't betray it. They rode slow the next 2 days. Eli grew paler. Clara rode closer. They didn't speak of what had passed between them. Not the kiss, not the blood, not the moment she'd chosen to stand in the open and die, if that's what it came to. But every time their eyes met across the fire, something old and heavy moved between them. When the hills of Cheyenne finally appeared on the horizon, Clara's chest tightened. The end of the road, a courtroom waited. Questions, faces that wouldn't see a woman trying to start over, but a ghost from another man's crimes. The outlaw's widow. They reached the outer edge of town by dusk. The wind carried smoke and horses and the faint clang of hammers. Civilization. Judgment. The kind of place where people talk too much and understand too little. Eli pulled the reins, stopping short of the main road. "We don't have to go in yet," he said. Clara looked at him. He was thinner now, worn, the bandage on his shoulder already soaked through. "We do," she answered. "I'm tired of running." He nodded, looked away, swallowed something he couldn't say. She reached across and touched his hand. "You could let me go," she whispered. "I know. You'd get in trouble. I know. You'd lose your badge." His jaw worked, clenched. Maybe I already did. Somewhere on that trail. Clara smiled, but it was a sad, tired thing. "You should have hated me." "I did. And now," he looked at her, long and quiet, then leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "Now I think I was waiting for you, even when I didn't know it." A long silence. Then he pulled back, just enough to see her face. "What do you want me to do?" She looked toward the lights of the town, toward the courthouse, toward the gallows and the gossip, and then back at him. "I want to be the kind of woman who walks in there on her own 2 feet. who answers their questions, who tells the truth, even if it means hanging, even if it means being hated, even if it means losing the only man who ever saw her as more than a mistake. He nodded once, didn't argue. They rode in together. The townsfolk whispered. The sheriff scowled, but no one stopped them. No one dared. Clara dismounted, handed her reins to a stable boy, and turned to Eli. "I don't regret anything," she said, "not even the worst of it, because it brought me here." He didn't answer. Didn't have to, because in his eyes she saw it. Not pity, not sorrow, but pride. Pride in a woman who had lost everything and still stood tall. Pride in a heart that had once been broken and now beat on. She walked through the courthouse doors alone, and somewhere behind her, Eli Remington lit a cigarette with shaking hands, looked up at the sky, and finally let himself hope. Because sometimes love doesn't come easy, sometimes it comes late. But when it does, it changes the ending, even for the outlaw's widow,